Hello everyone! I decided to do another Chess Killer Tips podcast revisit. For those of you who don't know, I've recorded 64 episodes of Chess Killer Tips podcast a while ago. It was just audio. This one is the Chess School podcast was just audio, but this one contained a small video file. And during these revisits, we re-listen to this podcast, and then I give some more examples on the topic this podcast is discussing. And today is the time for the famous Saavedra Position. I'm sure you know about this position, and you've heard and you've watched it, seen it several times. But let's re-listen and then analyze some other studies that contain the same motive, the same idea. Okay, so here comes the episode number 10.
Welcome to Chess Killer Tips, brought to you by ChessQueen.com. Here's your host, Alexandra Kosteniuk.
This is the Saavedra Position, which is one of the best-known endgame studies. White plays and wins. Try to find the solution till the very end, but remember to look for the best defense for black. You can press pause now and think about it for as long as you need. I'll be back at the end of the music. White wins by playing c7, rook d6 check. White has to play king b5, since after king c5, rook d1 will lead to a draw. So king b5, rook d5 check, king b4, again after king c4 it will be a draw after rook d1. So king b4, rook d4 check, king b3, rook d3 check, king c2. And here black has a very nice move, rook d4, since after c8 queen, rook c4 check, queen takes c4, it will be a stalemate, which is a draw. So what should white do in order to win here? Try to think about it for a few seconds. I'll be back soon. You've probably found the solution right now. White wins by promoting the pawn not to a queen but to a rook. c8 rook. The only defense that black has is rook a4, since white is threatening checkmate on a8. So rook a4, and king b3 threatening checkmate on c1, and at the same time the rook on a4. White wins. In chess, in order to win, you need to see variations one move further than your opponent. If you like chess movies, here is a link that you will find interesting at chessmovies.com. It's a website with a lot of interesting chess movies and clips, for example this one, Chess Mom, very nice cartoon, or there are many Blitz games of mine that I'm commenting for you. It's also fun to see and watch how grandmasters play Blitz.
That took place in Moscow. Here I'm playing with the Grandmaster Vladimir Potkin. As you can see, the game.
There are also many other chess films and clips that you might like. So visit it and enjoy.
Thanks for watching the Chess Killer Tips podcast. Send your questions and comments to Alexandra at Kosteniuk.com.
Okay, well, first of all, title Untitled. Thank you so much for subscribing. And back to the topic of our today's stream. In the episode 10 of the Chess Killer Tips podcast, I tell the listeners about a very famous study, Saavedra study, or it's also known as the Saavedra-Barbier study. Why is it so? Why two names are often mentioned when one talks about this position? The whole story, of course, is not like 100% known. I've read some articles explaining how it was published and etc. But usually, at least Wikipedia says the following: that in 1895, the position, not following, but some other position, but on the mirror flanks, on the king side flank, was published by Barbier with the when their white was winning. But Barbier mentioned, because the king was somewhere else, I think, somewhere not on a1, but Barbier mentioned that if the king will stand in the corner, it's going to be a draw. And he showed this line, quite a ordinary line nowadays, with a very strong rook d4, the last attempt, the last try, and c8 queen, and then rook c4. That was the original solution, published in 1895, but it didn't last long. This mistake was corrected a few days later by the Spanish priest Saavedra, who mentioned and noticed that it's possible, under promotion is possible. And in fact, the c8 rook is so strong that white wins here, because white is threatening to give a checkmate, and rook c4 doesn't work anymore because of the square on a2 is free for the king. It's not under control of the white rook. And if black plays rook a4, the famous double attack, we can say, multifunctional move, king to b3, attacking the rook, and at the same time opening the road for white's rook. And there is no way black can save from both threats. And yes, that's how it entered all the chess literature, this famous Saavedra-Barbier position. And of course, this idea has become, it's a very beautiful idea, very nice, very simple. And after that, several studies have been published using the same idea. And we are going to have a look at some of them. They all have the same ending position, but they start differently. So you see, this study is by Plato's brothers, two composers, and it starts differently. It's white to move. It's white to move, and white wants to win, of course. I haven't checked this position with the table base, because nowadays it's possible to check every single position with 6 pieces or less with the table base. Because a study usually is such, for a study to be correct in every way, there should be only one way for the stronger side to win or to make a draw. That's that's what is expected. We expect to see from the composers. And if a study has several solutions, then it doesn't count as the correct one. Okay, now this one is correct. I just checked it with a table base. It's white to move, and white plays and wins. And actually, in order to win, white has just like the only move that wins here. Well, black is threatening to play rook f5, I suppose. Let's see. If white plays h6, then rook f6 will follow, and white is losing this pawn, and then the rook can be sacrificed for the other pawn. What else? c6, of course, doesn't work as well because of rook to c1. Let's check what's going to happen after bishop e5. Seems as a smart move. But unfortunately it doesn't work because of rook f5. Also, the only move that saves black here. And it's a draw. King to c2, but king to c2 doesn't really protect white from this rook f5 idea. Because rook f5 is a threat. White needs to protect somehow one of his pawns. And the pawns, they go forward. Of course, it's white pawns, and we know white pawns, they go towards the 8th rank. So c4 is not possible here. Good evening everyone. Good evening, Dirk J. We're revisiting today the famous Saavedra-Barbier position. Bishop to d3 here is not possible. If you mean bishop d6, that's another. That's a possibility, but it doesn't really help white to win the game, because I can play rook h1. I can attack the pawn, and if you play c6, I'll go back to c1, and we'll win this pawn. So we eliminated several ways for white to proceed. Yes, and the only king to c4 also does not work because of, let me see, because of rook f5. And I think after c6, rook takes h5, c7. How do we make a draw? We take on h2, and yeah, after c8, white is even losing. So in order to make a draw, white needs to go towards the pawn and make a draw. But the idea is correct. So king b4 is the only move that wins here. If black gives checks, then king c4 should be played, because after king a5, rook h1, making a draw. So king c4, and then the king goes forward, and this position is winning for white, because after rook e1, the bishop can cover already the king, and it's easily won. So black needs to try this idea once again. Rook f5, attacking two pawns, and now we will see what is the difference. Well, the difference is quite simple to see. In this position, after rook h2, c8 queen wins the game. I was just checking, because there are some ideas. There are some positions with the king on b1. It would have been a draw. With the king on b1, it would have been a draw, because the rook would be able to just go and check white's king and have this rook c2. But here it's lost. After rook b2, the king can go to c3. So rook h2 is not possible. Rook h8 also is not possible because of bishop e5, double attack. So white needs to give checks. They hope to give checks. We remember that the king shall not go to the to c5, because rook h2 will come to c3 is also quite a bad idea because of rook h8, and the king stops white from winning from bishop e5. So white needs to go to b5, then to b6, and here quite a simple but very beautiful idea. of bishop d6. White sacrifices the bishop and forces, it's d6 guys, it's not e3, it's d6. The pawn is on c7. It forces black to take on d6, and the d file is quite an unfortunate place for the black rook. Why? Again, rook h8 does not work in view of bishop e5. Why? Because the d8 square is under control and the king guards the c file. And we come back to this famous Saavedra position with a beautiful under promotion idea of c8 rook, threatening checkmate, and there is no way black can save from losing. So quite a nice study. Let's go forward. This one is more complicated. More pieces on the board. We're not really going to try to solve it because it looks difficult. But c7 apparently is winning here. Too many pieces. For white, rook h8 loses because of bishop c5, bishop d4. Again, the same idea of two pieces standing on the long diagonal. If the rook takes on e4, white wins by beautiful checkmate. Here, queen takes c4 leads to a draw. But as, well, at least we often say in Russia, chess is not checkers, meaning that white doesn't have to take. We can we can choose. In checkers, if you can, you are obliged to take a piece if you have legal possibility to do so. And here, white shall refrain from taking the rook, but rather play knight c3. And suddenly, after rook takes c6, the black king is in the checkmating net. Very, very nice checkmating. And black can try his last chance with rook c6 check, then rook c4 check, and then taking on c6. Now, it seems that the draw is very near. It seems that black is going to take the pawn on c7 and win the game. But fortunately, very nice, again, bishop to d. And same idea, after rook takes d6, the rook cannot go to 8 because the pawn is under. But it can go back to c6. That's why white sacrifices a second piece to kind of invite the rook come closer. After king, same story. Pieces. One. Here to play rook c, then king, and rook d4. Work. It doesn't work. Sound cutting out. Let me see. I decided to some filters. Probably I was not supposed to do so. Let me know if now the sound is better. Okay, now I keep quiet, so you are not able to forgetting what filters I should use. Hopefully it's okay. Let me know. Да. Я добавила какие-то фильтры. И забываю, какие фильтры надо добавить, какие нет. У меня был другой микрофон вчера, он... No problem. Okay, good. The sound is back. I hope I am also back and you can hear me well. Sometimes it's cutting. I don't know what filters I should... Maybe like this. No, I remember that some filter is push to talk. Yes, I don't have this. I just have several filters. Yeah, not filter. No filter. It's No good. This one seems fine. Okay, let me know. Let me know. But with the filters or without them, white is winning here because just under promotion works very strong. Position, d8 rook, checkmate is threatening, e4, king to b. And we proceed. We go on to the next study by Mironov. And again, the same idea. c7. White is threatening to promote the queen. Rook h8 doesn't work. Bishop d4. And then suddenly black's king is checkmate. That. After h2, white takes on 2. Because apparently c8 queen doesn't work. Here it's just draw. So white needs to take. And now we're back to the same idea of sacrificing the bishop on d6 and getting to the Saavedra position. Very nice anti-promotion idea. A very nice параслов. Да что ж ты будешь делать? Ох уж эти фильтры. О, мы их уговорим. Методом проб и ошибок найдем правильный вариант. Так, okay. Hopefully now you will not lose. The microphone will behave well. Otherwise I can just switch off all the filters. But then you're gonna complain about some noise and sound. Let's go on. Let's go on to the next study. Another beauty, which ends exactly the same way, but it starts differently. And I just don't be scared and don't be surprised when the next the starting position of the next study will appear on the board. Hooray. Now it's very, very hard to understand what's going on. But this pawn is on g2, so black is threatening to play g1 queen, and white's pawns are on the 7th rank, so they are moving forward. And white wants to take the rook on d8, but yeah, as I told you, g1 queen will be a checkmate. So white better prepare. White better prepare by starting bishop to a7, taking under control this square. d4 is the strongest attempt, trying to open up the d file. And here comes very nice trick. White needs to play king to d1 to blockade the d pawn, because after king to c2, black will take 2 pawns with checks. And bishops versus rook, it's a draw. So white needs to start with king to d1. Black will try to d2, hoping for king takes d2, then rook d7, rook c7 gives draw again. So white needs to take on c2, and it seems as the same position, the same drawn position as on the board, but no, white wins here. Can you tell me how? Again, a very nice idea of inviting the rook to the unfortunate position. White to move. White is and wins. That's quite easy, considering all. Yes, d3, bishop d3, of course, like is the right idea, but in the wrong order. After bishop d3, rook is going to take on c7, and it's going to be a draw. Or playing bishop d3, white needs to start with bishop d4. Bishop d4 check, and black has to take on d4, because otherwise c8 queen will happen. The rook takes d4, Now bishop to d3, again forcing the rook to take on d3, d4 and d8 square. Right now, roll, and c8 is an unpleasant threat. Rook takes d3, and here comes the familiar to us position already. King to c2. And I think we haven't... Yeah, I mean, if the rook goes somewhere to f3, g3, or h3, c8, queen will be winning. So black play to d4, hoping for c8, queen. In that case, rook stalemate after queen takes c4. So c8, rook. Right move, and again, white wins. White wins! Over and over again. Same Saavedra-Barbier idea. Let's move on. And another. Two very easy studies with the same final positions, but they start differently. In one position, white knight versus a rook, and white wins quite easily. I think you will be able to notice it. You should be able to fast. Of course, c7 is the right move. Then d1, knight 3 will be played, and the result stops the winning. So black needs to check. Rook d1 check. And now how to play now? That's okay. I'm gonna switch off all the filters, then we won't have all the problems. I don't know what's going on with this mic today. Hopefully, like this, it will be better. Okay, guys. White has a choice. White has a choice, either to play king to c4 or to play knight to d2. And the question is, what is stronger? Why do you want to sacrifice the knight? Why don't you play king to c4? Yes. So it's a question to you. What's gonna happen after king to c4? Sometimes, okay, we're not playing a guess game, right? If there are only two possibilities, then it's like 50-50. Well, king to c4 does not really lose, because after rook c1, knight c3 is possible. So it does not lose the game. But it doesn't win neither. So king c4 unfortunately doesn't work, because after knight c3, king b2. Black has king b2 move, and white needs to make a draw. They are in time to make a draw, but it's just a draw. So you were right. Yes, you were right when suggesting the move knight to d2. And it's very important that after rook takes d2, king to c3, white king attacks the rook on d2. So there is no way, there is no time for black to play to b1, right? They could play king to b1. They wish they could play king to b1, but unfortunately for them, it's not possible, because king takes d2 will follow. So rook d1 is the last attempt, but then, as we know already, as we've seen several times, king goes to c2, rook d1, rook d4, and c8, rook. Under promotion, a very nice under promotion, and white wins again. So let's move on to the next very small study of Pagassian's with the same idea. Well, but with the same final position. This one, in this particular study, the pawn is not being under promoted, but white wins anyway. How, by the way? White plays and wins. Quite easy, but nevertheless very, very beautifully. Very beautifully. Yep. When you know all these ideas, exactly, Ricky. It's It's easy. It's easy. Bishop to d4. Because as we know, rook and the bishop versus rook, usually it's a draw if the king is not in the corner, is not cut off to the edge of the board. But in this particular situation, this position is lost because of this very nice discovery check. Bishop d4 check. Black needs to take, then king c2 follows, and we reach the famous Saavedra position. Rook a8 is a threat, rook a4, and king b3 is double threat. Yep. Quite an easy one. And the last one for today, the last study by Rossi. This one is quite recent, I believe from 1995. But this one is more complicated. Let me check that it's... How many pieces? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Okay. You can try to think for a while I'm trying to check. Probably this one does not work. It might have had some problems. Yeah. No, this one is not working, unfortunately. Unfortunately, the author made a mistake. Bishop d5 he wanted to play. And it seems nice, because after d1 queen, probably I should start here, but here, we should start here. Then it would be correct. But we've seen something similar, knight to d3, and then again, same position. But unfortunately for white, rook takes d5 should be played. And here, after king to d1, this position is drawn according to the table base. According to the table base, it's a draw. Well, there is no way to win, because the king is kind of glued to the d1 square. And yeah, that's just a draw. Okay. So it is beautiful, but it's not working. So it was a bad example, but let's pretend that I started here and I asked you, what is the best way for white to play? And the answer would be, I'm waiting for the answer. I'm waiting for the answer. Yep, exactly. Knight to d3. This one is easy. Knight to d3. Again, two squares are under control, and after rook takes d3, king c2. Yes, there are some interesting positions in chess that where pawn is stronger than the rook. It happens. That's why we like chess. Yes, exactly. Yes, Saavedra found just half a move and became known forever. But we should also recall the name of Barbier, I think, when talking about this famous study, because he was the one who published it first, although with the wrong evaluation. Okay, guys, I would appreciate sticking to avoiding, let's put some topics. Да, не могу понять, в чем вопрос. Сейчас. Здесь нету просто другого хода за белых. Белые все-таки выиграть хотят. После король b7 это будет ничья, так как ладья d7, и черные пожертвуют ладью за пешку. То есть здесь, несмотря на то, что пешка у белых, у черных ладья, но именно белые играют на победу. После король b7 будет ничья. После король c5 тоже будет ничья. На линию c вставать нельзя, потому что ладья опускается на d2 или на d1 и затем задерживает пешку c. Соответственно, если белые хотят выиграть, они должны ходить король b5, оставляя под контролем эти два поля. Затем король b4, снова два поля под контролем. Черным ничего не остается, как продолжать преследовать белого короля. Ну и здесь, наконец-то, белые готовы пойти король c2, не готовы пойти на линию c, потому что после король c2 уже ладья d1 хода нет. Нету идеи. Давайте посмотрим. Ну, в принципе, наверное, здесь король c3 можно пойти, правильно? Да. Король c3 можно и здесь пойти. Ну, на ладья d1 пойти король c2, и на ладья d4 мы вернулись к самой важной позиции этюда. Окей. Yeah, it was just a small clarification in Russian from one of my Russian-speaking viewer. So hopefully you enjoyed this episode 10 of my Chess Killer Tips podcast. I will, I think, solve a few puzzle rushes right now. Let me just